he's going to go through one of the models that he built and donated to the museum. We're going to talk about a B-17. So, Merv, we appreciate you being here.
All right. Hey, thank you very much. And I'm going to take my mask off. I know I'm a lot better looking with it on, but folks, this is Maddog Merv. I am here in Wendover, and we're at the museum. I've done some work with these folks. Absolutely awesome place. Great people that work here. If you ever get a chance to come out to Wendover, there's a lot of gambling. You know, it's a place where you can spend a lot of money. It's really cool, and you can win a lot of money. It's a lot of fun. But the history of this airbase is absolutely amazing. You might have heard of Wendover about the 509th and the training for the atomic bomb mission and all that kind of really cool stuff. And there's a piece up on my channel, Maddog Merv at youtube.com, that talks a little bit about the airbase and a little bit about Wendover. But we are going to do more and more pieces on Wendover because this is just, well, this is a cool place. A lot of history. Today, though, we're not going to cover the atomic bomb part. We're not going to cover the 509th part. We're just going to cover a little teeny portion of the history here. And that little teeny piece of history has to do with, well, kind of why this base was founded to begin with. So right after World War II started, they were throwing up training bases all over the place for fighters, for bombers, you know, the Air Corps was. And this became a heavy bomber training base. What they would do, there was 3 phases of training. You would train the individual. So places like Camp Kearns, Utah, you train the individual. And others. I mean, there's so many bases all over the U.S. The second training phase is they would train you together as an aircraft crew. So you'd get your crew assignment and come out here to Wendover and do crew training. And so that's primarily what they did from 1942 to late 1944. There were, I think it was 20 groups that were trained out here in both B-17 and B-24. And then, of course, you know, the 509th from there. There was the 3rd phase of training, and that 3rd phase of training would happen at another base, and that would actually be where the air crews, that now you have a B-17 or B-24 air crew who's all trained up, they would train with other crews in the group, so as a group. But that didn't happen here at Wendover. Let's just talk real brief about a couple of the famous groups, real famous groups. There was a couple of B-24 groups that trained here that flew out of Foggia, Italy, the 15th Air Force. But this picture here is really, really cool, and I'll try not to get too much glare on you there. But have you ever heard of the 100th bomb group? The Bloody 100th is what they're known as. They took a lot of casualties. I'm not going to go into it all. Look up the 100th bomb group in World War II and see some of the missions that they went on, see some of the things that happened to them. But guess what? Their individual crews trained here at Wendover. That's really cool. And there's another thing. If you're from Utah, you remember that the 388th Fighter Squadron flew out of Hale Air Force Base, Utah, using F-16s for many, many, many years. Well, the predecessor to the 388th was a group called the 388th Bomb Squadron. And guess where they trained? Right here at Wendover. It's so cool. I built a model of one of the B-17s that flew in Europe, and you can see the big old H, the square H on the tail. That's for the 388th Bomb Group. And I wanted to go over this particular model that I had built for the museum out here. So this is a 1:48 scale or quarter-inch scale B-17G that was a monogram, originally a monogram kit, an old monogram kit. And what I decided to do is I wanted to show off what the inside looked like, the crew stations looked like. So I took my Dremel tool to 1/2 of the fuselage and I just cut these openings. And you can see the openings here that I've cut here in the front for the bombardier, the navigator, for the pilot and co-pilot and the flight engineer, for the radio operator, Unfortunately, I didn't cut away a ball turret, but the waist gunner positions and the tail gunner position, so that you could kind of see inside and get an idea of what the crew positions looked like on one of these B-17s. So I used a couple of different detail sets that were out. I think Verlinden made one and Edouard made another one, and I used some of those. I used some resin figures as well as some of the figures that Revell puts out and Monogram puts out, and sometimes I had to reposition them just a little bit. Tried to use the pictures that I had available to see where everything was in the interior, and there's some great books on the B-17. And guess what? They've got some really good ones here too that will show you the interior of a B-17, what it looked like. Keep in mind that this is not the latest version of the B-17, because this still has the olive drab on it. This is how can I put it? The early version of the B-17G. Does not have the Cheyenne turret on it, which was made in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Yeah, pretty cool. Not too far from here. So anyway, just wanted to kind of cover this real quick and how I had built this. It took about a month or so because I had to cut away the areas. Wanted to make sure that everything, you could view it correctly as I had built it. And then if it didn't quite view right, I had to cut a little bit more away. Some of the props, I tried to make it look like the props were spinning on 3 of them, but well, some of the blades have broken off here, but that's okay. And then I did have just one regular propeller, trying to simulate an engine that was failing. So there's some of the shading that I did on these wings to try and make them look a little bit more realistic. On the B-17, keep in mind that your tail area here, these were made of fabric. This was made of fabric. So even though they used an olive drab paint, it looked a little bit different because this was aluminum and this would have been fabric here. Also keep in mind that on B-17s, different components like this tail, the stabilizers, different components were built in different factories and painted, and sometimes there wasn't a consistency in the paint, so they had some shade variations, which is kind of interesting. So I really like the radio operator there. If you can see, let's see, the radio operator, yeah, there he is. Looks like he's got a bead on a German aircraft coming in. So one of the interesting stories, there's a lot of them, but just one of the interesting stories about B-17s out here was and I think it was from the 100th group. There was a B-17 crew that was coming in for a nighttime landing, and they had kind of gotten lost. And if you've ever been out here, it's easy to get lost in this desert. It's vast. But they kind of get lost, and they're kind of, okay, this is about where Wendover is. That must be the airfield up ahead. They see this big, bright light, and they think that must be the beacon at the tower. So they've got some general idea of where the runway is. So they come in low, like they're going to land, and unfortunately, the beacon was not from the tower. The beacon was from a Western Pacific diesel locomotive. Yeah, they had diesels back then. That was on the tracks. Western Pacific ran right out here to Wendover. In fact, if sometime in the past you took the California Zephyr all the way from California to back east through Salt Lake, this was one of the stops on the California Zephyr. Anyway, this B-17 just boom right into the freight train, and yeah, it was a mess. Killed the entire crew. There were actually several accidents out here in Wendover, nearby in the mountains with these B-17s and some B-24s. And here at the museum, they actually have a couple of rusty old 50 caliber machine guns. And the story goes that out to the kind of southwest here, there was a B-17 that crashed during the war years. Well, the Air Force went out, grabbed the bodies, snatched them, brought them back. But a local rancher, well, went out there a few weeks later, and his boys found these 50 caliber machine guns that were still in the aircraft, and just kind of stashed them. And went back later and dragged these. Can you imagine these teenage kids dragging these back to the ranch? But and eventually they were returned. But yeah, it's really cool. These 50 cal machine guns actually were from here in Wendover, and they were from one of the aircraft that had crashed out here. So there is a million stories. You can see all these really cool uniforms that are from out here, from different people who had been out here and trained out here. And this museum is just absolutely full of great history. Behind me, there's this window, and you can see a floor off in the distance. So the building that I am in is the Officers Club, the old Officers Club. And it sat derelict for so many years, but it's now been restored. I mean, down to the tile, down to the wood floor. This is absolutely beautiful. Downstairs, there's a bar that they, well, not current bar, but the bar that they used to come to, the officers used to come to, that Tibbetts and his men came to. Yeah, this is an amazing place. If you get an opportunity, come on out here. And if you're too far away to come out here, check everything you can out on the internet about this place. And I am going to have some more things on my channel about Wendover. I'm gonna, every couple of months, I'm going to do a piece on something out here at the air base. So that's Maddog Merv at youtube.com. Check it out. I got like 200 shows, all kinds of different, like railroad history, model building, and just other cool history. So, and sometimes a lot of nonsense too. All right, folks, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. The folks at Wendover, well, they'll see you even sooner. Take care.